The wedding dress arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because I had taken the day off work just to be there when it came. The delivery man handled the box like it contained glass, and in a way, it did. Inside that box was my future, carefully folded in tissue paper and hope. Ivory silk, French lace sleeves, a sweetheart neckline Daniel had chosen himself. "You'll look like royalty," he had said when we ordered it. I believed him. Daniel Whitmore wasn't just my fiancé. He was my best friend, the man who held my hand when my career felt uncertain, the man who promised, under the glow of city lights, that I would never face life alone again. And my sister Clara stood beside me during the proposal, crying louder than I was. She had always been dramatic like that. Growing up, Clara was the beautiful one, sharp cheekbones, effortless charm, the kind of smile that turned strangers into admirers. I was the quieter sister, the dependable one, the one who stayed home while she chased excitement. But for once, something was mine. Daniel loved me, or at least I thought he did. 3 weeks before the wedding, small things began to shift. He canceled dinner plans. He stopped replying to messages as quickly. When I asked if something was wrong, he would kiss my forehead and say, "Just business stress, Elena. Don't overthink." Clara started visiting more often too. She claimed she wanted to help with final preparations. She offered to test cakes, review flower arrangements, even adjust the seating chart. I thought she was being supportive. One evening, I stopped by my parents' house unexpectedly. I had forgotten my grandmother's bracelet, the one I planned to wear on my wedding day. The house was unusually quiet. Then I heard laughter, soft, intimate. It came from the guest bedroom down the hall. I don't know what made me walk toward it. Maybe instinct, maybe fate. The door wasn't fully closed. Through the narrow gap, I saw Clara standing close to Daniel. Too close. Her hand rested on his chest. And then he leaned down and kissed her. Not a mistake, not confusion. A kiss that had been practiced. The bracelet slipped from my fingers and hit the floor. They turned. Clara's eyes widened, but only for a second. Daniel looked pale. "Elena," he started, "but there are moments when words mean nothing." The silence was louder than any scream, and in that silence I realized something devastating. The wedding dress in my claws. It was no longer mine. The wedding never happened. At least not for me. 2 months after I walked in on them, Clara wore a white dress in a villa overlooking Lake Como. The photos flooded social media, champagne towers, diamond necklaces, fireworks over the water. My dress, altered to fit her body, my fiancé, standing beside her as if I had never existed. My parents attended. They told me later that love is complicated, and that I shouldn't throw away family over a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding. I didn't argue. I didn't cry in front of them. I didn't beg Daniel to reconsider. I packed 2 suitcases and left the city the same week. New York didn't know my story. That was its greatest gift. I rented a tiny studio apartment with peeling paint and a window that overlooked a brick wall. It smelled like dust and ambition. I took a junior marketing job at a struggling tech startup that barely had funding for 3 months of payroll. The CEO interviewed me personally. "You don't have much experience," he said carefully. I learned fast. I replied. What I didn't tell him was that heartbreak is an incredible motivator. While Clara posted honeymoon photos from Paris and Monaco, I worked 16-hour days. I learned analytics, branding strategy, investor relations. I volunteered for projects no one else wanted. I stayed after everyone left. Pain turned into fuel. Some nights I would scroll past headlines about Daniel Whitmore, a young investor expands luxury real estate portfolio, and my chest would tighten. But instead of crying, I studied. I watched his interviews. I analyzed his deals. I learned how he thought. The startup survived its first year, then it grew. A small funding round turned into a major investment. My ideas began shaping campaigns that tripled revenue. 3 years later, I wasn't an assistant anymore. I was head of strategy. 5 years later, I negotiated our largest partnership deal without supervision. 6 years later, I invested my savings and secured equity. And in the seventh year, when our valuation crossed $400 million, the board voted unanimously. I became CEO. That same week, an investment proposal landed in my inbox. Whitmore Capital. I stared at the name for a long time. 7 years ago, they thought I had disappeared. They were wrong. I hadn't disappeared. I had been building something powerful enough to make them look up and realize I was never the weak sister. I was just the patient one. The meeting was scheduled for 10:00 a.m. sharp. I arrived at 9:30, not because I was nervous, but because I wanted the quiet, the stillness before impact. The conference room on the 42nd floor had floor-to-ceiling glass walls overlooking Manhattan. The city stretched endlessly beneath us, steel, ambition, power. 7 years ago, I had nothing but 2 suitcases and a broken heart. Now I owned the view. At exactly 10:02, the receptionist's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Grace Whitmore Capital is here." Grace, the name I had chosen professionally, my middle name, the name Daniel wouldn't immediately connect to the girl he left behind. "Send them in," I replied calmly. The door opened. Daniel walked in first. He still wore tailored suits, still carried himself with quiet authority, but the sharp confidence I once admired was slightly dulled. His shoulders were tighter, his eyes more cautious, and behind him Clara, perfectly styled, designer heels, diamond bracelet catching the light. For a brief second none of us spoke. Then Daniel looked directly at me. Recognition hit like a lightning strike. "Elena," Clara's fingers tightened around her handbag. I rose slowly from the head of the table. "Good morning," I said, extending a professional smile. "Please have a seat." They sat. Daniel cleared his throat. "We weren't aware you were CEO." "I imagine not," I replied smoothly. Clara forced a polite expression. "You look well." "I am." The word carried more meaning than she understood. Daniel opened his presentation folder. "We're looking for a strategic partnership, partial acquisition, liquidity restructuring." His voice steadied as he moved into numbers, projections, assets, expansion plans. But I had already reviewed everything. Whitmore Capital wasn't invincible anymore. Several risky investments had failed. Luxury real estate had slowed. Their cash flow was tightening. They needed this deal. "You're overleveraged," I said calmly when he finished. Daniel hesitated. "Yes." Clara's jaw tightened, and without external backing, I continued, "You'll start liquidating within 18 months. Silence. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across Daniel's face. He wasn't the powerful man who had chosen my sister over me. He was a businessman facing collapse. "What are you proposing?" he asked carefully. I folded my hands on the table. "A controlling stake." Clara inhaled sharply. "That's excessive," she said. "Is it?" I asked gently. Daniel studied me, really studied me, as if seeing the transformation for the first time. 7 years ago, they thought they had taken everything from me. But sitting at the head of that table, watching them wait for my decision, I understood something profound. This wasn't revenge, it was leverage, and for the first time in my life, I held all of it. Daniel didn't answer immediately. He leaned back in his chair, fingers pressed together, the same way he used to when negotiating deals. But this time, there was no arrogance in the gesture, only calculation and something else, reluctance. "A controlling stake means you own us," he said quietly. "It means I stabilize you." I corrected, "You keep your title, you keep your name, but major decisions run through my board." Clara's composure cracked first. "This is personal," she snapped. "You're punishing us." I looked at her steadily. "If this were personal," I said calmly, "you wouldn't be sitting here." The room fell silent because we all knew what I meant. If I wanted revenge, I could have refused the deal entirely. I could have watched their empire crumble piece by piece, investors withdraw, properties auctioned, headlines speculating about financial collapse. Instead, I was offering survival on my terms. Daniel exhaled slowly. "If we don't accept, you'll find another investor," I said, "one who won't be as patient." He knew I was right. Within a week, the contracts were signed. Within 3 months, I began restructuring Whitmore Capital. Risky assets were sold, lavish expenses were cut, the private yacht disappeared quietly, the third vacation property was listed, staff was reorganized. For the first time, Daniel reported quarterly decisions to someone else, to me. Clara requested a private meeting one evening. She looked different without cameras and filters, tired, uneasy. "Why are you doing this?" she asked softly. "Because I can," I replied. She swallowed. "I thought you'd hate us forever." "I considered that. I don't." I said honestly. "Hate takes energy. I used mine to build something." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. For the first time in her life, she had nothing to take from me. A few days later, Daniel asked to speak alone. "I made a mistake," he admitted. "I see that now." I studied him, not with longing, not with anger, just clarity. "You made a choice." I corrected gently. He hesitated. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't?" I glanced around my office, the skyline glowing behind me, the company I built from nothing, the strength I earned the hard way. "No," I said, because the truth was simple. If he hadn't betrayed me, I would have married comfort. Instead, I married ambition. 7 years ago, my sister took my fiancé. Today, her husband answers to me. And the sweetest revenge wasn't taking him back. It was proving I never needed him at all.